Hi friends, I hope you all are doing great. Today, let's study about cost. Cost is a very essential factor that determines the level of production, prices of goods, payments to factors, etc. So today, let's study about the modern theory of cost. The modern theory of cost. The U-shaped cost curves of the traditional theory have been questioned by various writers both on theoretical as well as on empirical grounds. As early as 1939, Mr. George Stigler suggested that the short-run average variable cost has a flat stretch over a range of output, reflecting the fact that firms build plants with some flexibility in their productive capacity. The shape of the long-run cost curve has attracted greater attention in economic literature too, probably due to the serious policy implications of the economies of large-scale production. Several reasons have been put forward to explain why the long-run cost curve is L-shaped rather than U-shaped. It has been argued that the managerial diseconomies can be avoided by the improved methods of modern management science, and even when they appear at the large scale of output, they are insignificant relative to the technical economies of large plants, so that the total cost per unit of output falls, at least over the scales which have been operated in real industrial world. Now let's look into the short-run cost curves and the modern theory of costs. The first one is the average fixed cost. This is the cost of indirect factors, that is, the cost of the physical and personal organization of the firm. The fixed costs include the cost for A. The salaries and other expenses of the administrative staff. B. The salaries of staff involved directly in the production but paid on a fixed term basis. C. The wear and tear of the machinery, that is the standard depreciation allowances. D. The expenses for maintenance of buildings. E. The expenses for the maintenance of land on which the plant is installed and operated. Now, let's see, why does a businessman wants to plan his plant size? The planning of the plan consists of deciding the size of these fixed indirect factors which determine the size of the plant because they set limits to its production. The businessman will start his planning with a figure for the level of output that he anticipates selling, and he will choose the size of the plant which will allow him to produce this level of output more efficiently and with maximum flexibility. The plant will have a capacity larger than the expected average level of sales because the businessman wants to have some reserve capacity for various reasons. Now let's look into the various reasons for having reserve capacity. The businessman will want to be able to meet seasonal and cyclical fluctuations in his demand. Such fluctuations cannot always be met efficiently by a stock inventory policy. Reserve capacity will allow the entrepreneur to work with more shifts and with lower costs than a stockpiling policy. The reserve capacity will give the businessman greater flexibility for repairs of broken down machinery without disrupting the smooth flow of production process. The entrepreneurs will thus buy from the beginning such a basic machine which allows the highest flexibility in view of future growth in demand, even though this is a more expensive alternative now. Some reserve capacity will always be allowed in the land and buildings, since expansion of operations may be seriously limited if new land or new buildings had to be acquired. And finally, there will be some reserve capacity on the organizational and administrative level. The administrative staff will be higher at such numbers as to allow some increase in the operations of the firm. In the following figure, the figure shows the average fixed cost curve. The points from small a to b, that is the broken line, shows the reserve capacity of the firm. Next comes the average variable cost. As in the traditional theory, the average variable cost of modern microeconomics includes the cost of direct labor, which varies with output, the raw materials, and the running expenses of the machinery. The short-run average variable cost curve in the modern theory has a saucer type shape, that is, it is broadly U-shaped but has a flat stretch over a range of output as in the above figure. The flat stretch corresponds to the built-in plant reserve capacity. Over this stretch, the short-run average variable cost is equal to the marginal cost, both being constant per unit of output, where MC is a straight line that coincides with the AVC. To the left of the flat stretch, the marginal cost lies below the short-run average variable cost, while to the left of the flat stretch, the MC rises above the SAVC. The falling part of the SAVC shows the reduction in costs due to the better utilization of the fixed factors and the consequent increase in skills and productivity of the variable factors. With better skills, the waste in raw materials are also being reduced and a better utilization of the whole plant is reached. The increasing part of the SAVC reflects a reduction in labor productivity due to the longer hours of work, the increase in the cost of labor due to overtime payment, which is higher than the current wage, the waste in materials, and the more frequent breakdown of machineries as the firm operates with overtime or with more shifts. The reserve capacity makes it possible to have a constant SAVC, that is the short-run average variable cost, within a certain range of output. It should be clear that this reserve capacity is planned in order to give the maximum flexibility in operation of the firm. It is completely different from the excess capacity that arises with the U-shaped cost of the traditional theory of firm. The average cost curve. The average cost is obtained by adding the average fixed cost and the average variable cost at each level of output. In the figure you can see that the marginal cost curve cuts the average cost curve at its minimum point. Now let's derive the total cost curves. Mathematically, the cost output relationship may be written down in the following form. That is, C is equal to B0 plus B1x, whereas the B0 is the intercept and B1 is the slope. The total cost is equal to the total fixed cost plus total variable cost. If you can see the figure, the total cost curve is a straight line with a positive slope over the range of the reserve capacity, whereas the average fixed cost is a rectangular hyperbola as we have seen in the previous figure. The total fixed cost, that is B0, that is the intercept, which is a straight line parallel to the output axis. Next comes the total variable cost, that is B1x divided by x, which gives us the B1, that is the slope. The total variable cost is also an upward sloping curve, as you can see. It is also a straight line. Next comes the average total cost, that is B0 divided by x plus B1. The average total cost curve is a falling curve over the range of the reserve capacity, as we have seen in the previous figure. Now let's look into the long run cost in the modern microeconomics theory, that is the L-shaped scale curve. These are distinguished into production costs and managerial costs. All costs are variable in the long run and they give rise to a long run cost curve, which is roughly an L-shaped curve. The production cost falls continuously with increase in output. At very large scales of output, managerial costs may rise. However, the fall in production cost is more than the increase in the managerial cost so that the total long run average cost falls with increase in skills. Now let's look into the production cost. Production cost falls steeply to begin with and then gradually as the scale of production increases. The L shape of the production cost is explained by the technical economies of large scale production. Initially, these economies are substantial, but after a certain level of output is reached, all or most of these economies are attained given the technology of the industry. If new techniques are invented for large scales of output, they must be cheaper to operate. But even with the existing known techniques, some economies can always be achieved at larger outputs. Economies from further decentralization and improvement in skills of the laborers. Lower repair costs may be attained if the firm reaches a certain size. The firm, especially if it is a multi-product, may well undertake the production of some of the materials or equipment that is needed instead of buying them from other firms. Now, let's look into the managerial costs in the long run cost curves. In the modern management science, for each plant size, there is a corresponding organizational administrative setup appropriate for the smooth operation of the plant. There are various levels of management, each with its appropriate kind of management technique. Each management technique is applicable to a range of outputs. There are small scale as well as large scale organizational techniques. The cost of different techniques of management first fall to a certain plant size. At very large scales of output, managerial costs may rise but very slowly. Now, if we may draw the long run average cost curve implied by the modern theory of cost as above, for each short run period, we obtain a short run average total cost curve which includes production costs, administration costs, other fixed costs, and an allowance for normal profit. Assume that we have a technology with 4 plant sizes with costs falling as size increases. We said that in business practice, it is customary to consider that a plant is used normally when it operates at a level between 2/3 and 3/4 of capacity. We may draw the long run average cost curve by joining the points on the short run average total cost curves or the short run average cost curves corresponding to 2/3 of their full capacity of each plant size. Now, if we look at the characteristics of this long run average cost curve derived like this, it has the following characteristics. That is, it does not turn up at very large scales of output. It is not the envelope of the short run average cost curves but rather intersects them. If, as some writers believe, the long run average cost curve falls continuously, though smooth at very large scales of output, the long run marginal cost will lie below the long run average cost at all scales. If there are some minimum optimal scales of plant in which all possible scales of economies are reaped, beyond that scale, the long run average cost remains constant. In this case, the long run marginal cost lies below the long run average cost until the minimum optimal scale is reached and coincides with the long run average cost beyond the level of that output. I have taken references from A. Kautsiani's Modern Microeconomics, then Michael Dietrich, Transaction Cost Economics and Beyond, and various Google sites for getting the figures. I hope you all understood what I had been teaching you. In case of any doubt, please reach out to me. Thank you.